Okay, ready to dive in. We're tackling a topic that's everywhere these days, finding your why.
Yeah, it's really taken off, hasn't it?
It's like, who hasn't heard this by now? So you've brought along some Simon Sinek, both Find Your Why and Start with Why. Guessing you want to get to the bottom of whether this is the key to it all or just another self-help trend.
Well, it's interesting how much it's resonated,
Ah,
you know? Like it's tapping into something people really crave. That need for purpose, for meaning, especially in a world that feels kind of crazy sometimes. And Sinek doesn't mess around. He's saying this isn't just a nice idea, it's how our brains are wired.
he goes all in on that, doesn't he? That whole golden circle thing. Most of us are doing it backwards, basically.
It's a pretty radical notion when you really think about it. Most businesses, they start with what they do, what they sell.
Yeah. Right, makes sense. That's the obvious stuff.
Exactly. And some, they get to the how they do it differently. But very few start with the why, the deeper reason behind the action. And what's fascinating, he connects this to literally how our brains work.
Oh, he does love his brain science.
Well, it makes sense. The part of our brain handling emotions, gut decisions, that's where why lives. But the logic, the language part, that's for what and how. So when you communicate from why, you're speaking directly to the part that drives behavior.
So instead of telling me about features, you're telling me why you even bothered creating this thing in the first place.
Exactly. And that's what sticks with people. Think about Apple. They're not just selling sleek gadgets. They're selling the idea of challenging the status quo. Their why is about empowering people through tech.
It's like that Harley-Davidson example he uses. Nobody's buying a Harley for the gas mileage.
Right. You're buying into a whole feeling. Freedom, rebellion, being part of something bigger.
So it's not just having a why, it's gotta be genuine. If you're all about sustainability but your practices don't match up, people see through that.
Oh, absolutely. Authenticity is key. He's got this analogy, the celery test. Imagine you're all about healthy eating. You're more likely to pick celery over a cookie, right?
Even if we want the cookie.
Exactly. Even if you splurge sometimes, your core value is still there. That's what guides your choices.
So if a decision fits your why, it'll feel right, even if it's not the easy way out.
Exactly. And when you know your why, those decisions get easier. You've got that inner compass.
This is all making sense, but how do you find your why? Feels kind of big and scary, right?
Yeah. It can, yeah, especially if you think of it like some huge quest or something. But Sinek actually has a pretty practical approach. It's less about a sudden epiphany, more like connecting the dots of your own life.
He talks about looking back, right? Those times you felt most engaged, most you.
Exactly. Those themes that keep popping up where you felt energy, passion, even just a gut feeling of being on the right track.
Yeah.
He even says, grab a friend, someone who knows you well.
Oh, because we're too close to our own stuff sometimes.
Totally. Someone else can spot those patterns. So like, hey, haven't I heard you talk about this kind of work before? With that same spark in your eye.
Having that outside perspective to connect the dots.
It's amazing what comes out with the right questions. What was it about that project you loved? Why did that achievement feel different? Unlock some deep stuff.
He's big on telling stories, too, not just vague statements like, I like helping people, versus the story of that time you volunteered and got someone back on their feet.
It makes it real. He says our brains are wired for stories. We don't just think them, we feel them. So your why becomes this powerful connection to yourself and others.
Building your own narrative in a way, the experiences, the values, what you want to leave behind.
And that clarity, it's empowering. Not just work, but relationships, hobbies, how you spend your free time.
It's like those nested whys he talks about. The company has one, but teams, even individuals within it, have their own.
And when they're aligned, that's the magic. Everyone's working towards the same big goal, but feeling good about their own part in it too.
Like that IT department example, they realized it wasn't just keeping computers running, it was connecting people. Way more inspiring.
Right. Probably a happier IT department too. But then, what happens when it doesn't line up? Your why versus the company's.
That's got to be tough.
It can be. Frustration, feeling stuck.
Yeah.
Sinek says, sometimes that's a sign you're in the wrong place, role, whatever. But he also says, talk about it.
Before you jump ship.
Yeah. Maybe that conversation shifts something for you or them. You never know.
Even if it doesn't work out there, at least you figured out your why more clearly.
Exactly. And maybe it leads you to a better fit. Creating your own role, your own business, finding that company that gets it.
It's about impact, not just a job title.
Be proactive. Own your why. Use it like a guide for your career.
And this isn't just work stuff, right? Sinek's a big believer in applying this to life, too.
It's huge. Relationships, hobbies, community, that same sense of purpose.
So how does this whole why thing play out in our personal lives, then?
Same starting point. Clarity. What matters most to you outside of work? What impact do you want on your family, friends?
What gets you fired up when you're not on the clock?
Exactly. Once you know those core values, you can make choices that actually reflect them.
So it's like being intentional, not just going through the motions, but thinking, does this match up with what I care about?
That's it. Bringing that intentionality from work into our personal lives.
Designing a life that fits your values, your passions, all of it.
And it's not selfish. It's about being the best you so you can show up for others better.
Can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Exactly. Finding your why. It's about filling your cup so you have something to give.
You know, it's one thing to wrap your head around this why thing, but it's another to actually feel it click. And I gotta say, digging into this with you, it's really hitting home for me.
That's the thing about connecting with your why. It's not just head stuff, it's heart stuff, too. Once you tap into that, it's powerful.
It's like, oh, that's why I'm doing this. This is what it's all about.
Totally. And Sinek gives you a way to actually do something with that feeling, aligning your hows with your why, he calls it.
Right, the hows being the actions, the nitty-gritty of how you get it done. Can't just have the big idea, gotta walk the walk, too.
Like that example, Volkswagen trying to do a luxury car. Totally clashed with their whole thing about being affordable. For everyone, their actions didn't match their message. People got confused.
Like trying to force a square peg in a round hole. Not gonna happen.
Exactly. Same in our own lives. If what we do doesn't match our values, it just feels off.
That feeling of being out of sync, you know something's wrong even if you can't explain it.
And that's where knowing your why is so helpful. It's like a compass. Keeps you on track even when things get tough.
Like his analogy, the golden circle as a megaphone. Your why is at the center, and everything else you do just amplifies it.
And when that message is clear, that's how you inspire people, build trust, make a real impact. Think about the companies, the leaders who've changed things strong. Why? Driving everything.
It's like they're not selling a thing, they're selling a belief, a whole different way of seeing things. 10OMS shoes, you don't just think shoes, you think about their mission.
Exactly. It's part of their DNA. They're not just about profit, they're about making a difference.
That's inspiring that we all have that in us, to find our why and actually do something with it.
It all starts with those big questions. What lights us up? What impact do we want? What do we want to leave behind?
And it's not about having it all figured out right now. It's about being open to the journey.
Exactly. Embracing the unknown, trusting that your why will show up sometimes in the most unexpected ways.
This has been amazing. Really makes you think about the power of this why thing, not just for work, but for life.
And this is just the start, right? The real magic happens when you take this and run with it and make it your own.
So if you're ready to live a life that actually means something, a life driven by your why, take that first step. You never know where it might lead.